coffee shop in a city, which is every coffee shop in every city on a day, which is every day. Hello, friends. Welcome to the second episode of Barista Unfiltered, a podcast dedicated to the life and times of baristas. They tell us what's brewing in their lives and work in this free-flowing and unfiltered podcast. I got to do a couple shout outs before we get started today. First off, I want to thank Victor Hugo, who works at Proper Grounds Coffee in Lafayette, Colorado. He is a dear person, a hilarious person, and has served up my coffee many times. And one morning when I came in with this crazy idea to start a podcast about baristas and barista life, he looked at me in the eyes and said, make it happen. And I did. I sat down, and that is when I came up with the title for the podcast, and all kinds of creative juices started flowing that day. So I got to shout out to Victor over that. Second shout out, Stuart Yoshida, who I don't even know if he drinks coffee, but he sure does play ukulele. He has a podcast called Ooktown, and that is spelled OOKTOWN.com. It's a ukulele podcast. Obviously, I love the ukulele, and I know a lot about ukulele thanks to Stuart's podcast. When we started to create our podcast and got into all the recording questions that come with building a podcast, Stuart was instrumental in helping me figure out all the nuts and bolts of this. And I sure do appreciate his time. So without further ado, let's get started with today's show. I'm Jodie Lee, and
I'm Austin Miller.
We are your hosts, and we are so grateful you've joined us for another episode. Today, our guest is Jake Schell. Hi, Jake.
Hi.
He's a barista, and he works in Lafayette, Colorado. He's a friendly fellow with many talents, including a wide range of hobbies and interests, from mountain biking to aviation. And we could get him talking about a great many things. Today, we're going to hear about his burgeoning business as a coffee roaster. Our podcast and his roastery just happened to be developing simultaneously. So we're going to get to know him today, and then we're going to hear updates from him weekly on our podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Jake, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Morning, Jake.
Good morning.
First thing we always want to know of our guests is what kind of coffee you had this morning.
This morning I made a Chemex of a new release that we're actually releasing tomorrow. The shop I'm currently working at, it's a natural process Nicaragua. Tastes like strawberries and cream.
It sounds good to me. I had some coffee this morning from Jake, roasted it for me. It's the melisma bean from Proper Grounds, and I made it in my mocha pot because I'm learning to make coffee at home. So I have a little iced latte this morning. What you got, Austin?
So I didn't end up doing the French press. I walked 2 blocks to get a gigantic drip coffee that was going to last me through the whole show. So that's what I'm drinking today.
Shout out to Spikes.
Yep.
If you remember from our last show, that's where Austin works, and he manages that crazy place. So let's get to Jake. When we first met 2 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, maybe longer. I'm not sure.
A little longer.
You're working as a barista at a coffee shop called Proper Grounds. So that business expanded, moved to a larger location in 2017. The name changed a little bit, but that wasn't all that changed. Tell me about that coffee shop. Speak a little bit to the changes that happened there with the physical relocation and the menu, and then tell us how that's affected you there with working there and how it's inspired you to explore the coffee industry.
Yeah, so it was called Proper Grounds Coffee. Existed on the back of a big strip mall type of building. Pretty hard to find. It's been around for 6 or 7 years. Even though it's hard to get to, grew through word of mouth. Cody, the owner, built a great business, worked really hard on bringing in customers and getting people excited about craft coffee in the area. And we kind of outgrew the space, and he started looking for new places to set up. And with the new setup, he wanted to kind of change up the menu a bit and also expand to offering cocktails because that's something he's interested in. So we became Proper Coffee and Cocktails. Moved into a space probably about half a mile from where we were before. Much easier to get to, much better visibility, shares space with other businesses, kind of shares a common area that connects several businesses, breweries, restaurants, and shares space with some offices. Yeah. Added the cocktails and pared down the coffee menu a bit to be a little more specialty, a little more craft.
So you're roasting beans for Proper. Are you the only roaster there?
I am.
And so tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a roaster. I have no idea what's involved.
It's awesome. I started roasting about a year and a half ago, maybe. I was taught by one of the former baristas and roasters, Kelsey, as well as the owner, Cody.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
remember Kelsey?
I do. Last time I saw her, she was at the Corvus.
She was at Corvus for a little while, and then she has moved on to do some different things and is going to school to eventually become a naturopath doctor.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So Kelsey and Cody taught you roasting.
Yes.
Tell me about that. What was it like?
Cody asked me in a kind of a review meeting type of meeting, and it asked me if I would want to learn to roast, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, that'll help me to know a little more about the coffee, and it'll be interesting to know. Didn't really think that I'd care to do it that much, but I was willing to learn and give it a try. And about the second time of roasting, I was really impressed and decided that's what I really wanted to do. It's a really fun process. You're always kind of chasing numbers and chasing flavors, making all kinds of adjustments to get different flavors and qualities out of each coffee.
So is it a bit like a chemistry lab experiment where you've got like all these different variables that affect the end product?
Yeah, very much so. You're making changes sometimes every 15 to 30 seconds, and those small changes can make a big difference in how the coffee tastes.
I have a question. I'm curious, are there like a million different kinds of actual roasters, and you kind of have to choose like amongst, because you don't really hear from the coffee shop end like, oh, we're using this or that kind of roaster actually. But did you have to make a decision like which kind you wanted to go with?
Yeah, so luckily that decision was made for me by the owner.
Yeah.
We started out roasting on, well, he started long ago roasting on a air popcorn popper in his house, like many roasters do, and then moved up to a hot top. Yeah, so that's called fluid bed roasting. You can take an old school popcorn popper, and it circulates air and gives a high temperature. You need the old school because they get hotter than the newer ones. Yeah, and you can roast coffee that way and get some pretty good results. You don't have a lot of control, but just the time, and you can get some good stuff off of that. So he started that way and then moved to a hot top, and then eventually got a 2.5 kilo, which is around 5 pounds. Forgive me for not knowing exactly, but around a 5 pound Diedrich roaster, which is a drum roaster. They are made in the US and they're great machines. And then we were very busy roasting 6, sometimes 7 days a week. And we were doing that behind the counter in the old shop. So it got to be kind of a cluster. And he upgraded to a 12 kilo roaster. So much larger, started doing 20-pound batches instead of 4-pound batches.
So how many pounds of coffee can you roast in a day?
In a day, I'll probably do around 250 to 300 pounds, just kind of depending what time of year it is, what our volume is looking like, how much we have going to wholesale, and all of that.
So how long does it take you to do a batch, like from start to finish?
Yeah, so right now I'm doing 13 or 15-pound batches, depending on the coffee, and they average anywhere from about 9 minutes to 13 minutes at the longest.
Okay.
Depends how much development you're wanting to get and different types of coffee. lend better to different styles of roasting, different temperatures and different amounts of time for the whole roasting process.
Do you I've never actually seen you roast coffee, but I'm imagining if you're making adjustments like in 15 seconds here and there, and it's, you know, it's a very precise process. I imagine that like you can't be bothered for that 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's actually pretty important. And it's something that's a little bit of a struggle. A few months ago, we moved the roaster into the cafe. So it's kind of open to the public, and people are able to kind of walk back and say, hey, which is great, but it also makes things pretty distractible and can be somewhat problematic if you're not focusing.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever lost a batch?
The only time I've lost a batch was when power went out. And that was painful.
So, Austin, do you have any other questions about roasting?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So, I mean, eventually you made this transition like from, I used to see you serving up coffee drinks, and then all of a sudden there was no more Jake behind the bar. There was Jake making things happen. So, did you make the decision to just shift to roasting, or was that decision made for you? Like, tell me how this happened.
It was a little bit of both. The roasting demands kind of caused me to be at the roastery more and more, which meant that I had less and less time to do barista shifts. So it was just kind of a long transition from doing both to needing to just focus on roasting and bagging and dealing with wholesale and all of that.
So now you're thinking, or you are starting your own roasting company.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Now you're
Yeah.
smiling.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really fun. It's, even though we haven't haven't put our first batches through the roaster yet, it's a lot of work and takes a lot longer to get through all the processes and do things right, finding space to roast, meeting all the requirements of the city and county and state to be able to do things on the up and up, and takes more money than I realized as well.
Yeah. So you've got a partner in this project.
Have a couple of partners now.
Okay. Tell us about
really
that.
Exciting.
Can you name them and tell us how you know them?
Yeah. So the whole thing started, a coffee shop friend of mine, a guy named Sean Neer, came in the shop, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and he had a bike on his car. So I immediately was interested in chatting with him. And
friend.
Yeah, exactly. So we chatted a bit, and he was asking for single origin espresso. And I was like, okay, yeah, want to talk to this guy. And he just was really into the details of single origin espressos and asking about, what espresso machine we had, and if we did pre-infusion, and what kind of burrs our grinder had, and like some really high level nerdy coffee stuff.
Wait, now what is pre-infusion?
And what is single origin coffee?
Yeah,
and
I've got that
what
part.
are burrs?
Yeah, so single origin coffee, the easiest way to look at it is that it's not a blend. It's a coffee that comes from one region, one place, and you can even get down to the specifics of one single farm or state. So if you want to have, it's kind of like nerding out on wine. Like you can dive as deep as you want, and there are, thousands of different flavors that you can get out of coffees. And so you can really hone in on what flavors you like, and you can isolate those from certain regions. So it's fun to have single origin coffee, so you can dive deep into all of those flavors. You don't see single origin espresso served in just every coffee shop. So the fact that he was talking about that made me aware that he was into coffee. Burrs are what is in any decent grinder. A lot of us, start with a blade grinder that basically just chops the beans up. They're not uniform, so that's not the best way to get an even extraction on your coffee. So burr grinder is the way to go. And the burrs are just essentially two plates. They can be conical or they can be flat, and they give a much more uniform grind to your coffee. So your extraction can be more even and repeatable, consistent. Third question was what?
Extraction. So you said something extraction.
Okay, so extraction just means basically the end product that you're pulling from the coffee. Water plus coffee. There's an extraction that is the end result.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, how much of the flavor you're pulling out of the coffee, and that can be changed with water temperature and grind size and time that water is with the coffee.
So I want to hear your story about Sean, but I also want to know when you're talking about grinding the coffee and using a burrs, is there a machine that you recommend? Because I think what we're using at home is that blade that you're saying isn't good.
Yeah.
And I am finding when I can't quite get it's the difference between like a half a second and a full second, whether it's too much ground or too little ground.
Yep. Yeah. So the burr grinder has even, I guess you could say, channels. So it's going to make the coffee more uniform. And that's why it's better than a blade grinder, because the blade grinder is just counting on gravity. It's gonna hit the bean and break it, and then the bean's gonna fall back down. It's gonna hit it again and break it, but it's completely up to chance, pretty much, where it's gonna break that bean and how big the particle size is gonna be. And so
But if you want to do it really well at home, you got to be ready to spend some money.
How much money?
I mean,
how much money?
Like if you want like a coffee shop level experience, you got to spend. I mean, the grinders, like the really good like conical burr grinders, are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, now I know what you're talking about. That thing that you're always piling beans into, and it's okay.
Well, that doesn't always have a conical burr, even though the one that you see with the hopper, you could still have like a flat burr inside of it. So the conical burr is usually, I think, more expensive, but I feel like that's kind of the preferred way to do it now.
All right, I'll do some shopping. And for those of you listening who have no clue about making grinding coffee like me, I'll put some notes in the show notes in the links or something like that. That I'll give you some recommendations by the time we're all done with this.
Yeah, so a starting point would be a Bodum Bistro is pretty decent. That's the first burr grinder that I had.
Okay.
A step up, which is probably the best bang for your buck, unless you want really coarse ground, is a Baratza Encore. And those are about $140, but well worth it if you want repeatable results.
Okay, so I will get those links and they'll be in the notes for somebody who wants to spend $240 on a
$140.
Oh, $140. Well,
yeah.
That's so much different. I want a $20 grinder that does it all. I guess that's not reality. Okay, so you told us you met Sean.
Yeah.
How did you guys decide to start a business together?
So like I said, he was obviously into coffee, obviously into bikes, and those are two of my biggest passions. Like I said, that was about a year ago. We've kept in touch. So it turns out he had on a Yeti Fox jersey. He was getting ready to go ride when I first met him, and I asked him if he rode for them, and he said yes. And so I went home and Googled him, and turns out he's a professional mountain biker, travels the world racing bikes. He's really good, really fast. The first thing I saw was him winning Angel Fire downhill, I think in maybe 2016 or something. So it's like, oh, wow, he's really serious, good mountain biker. And so I started following him on Instagram. I would see him post about bike stuff, obviously, and coffee stuff. And I kind of made a joke at one point. He had a video where he was doing a manual for like half a mile. And I said, you have to teach me the manual. And he said, sure, you have to teach me how to roast coffee. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And he, a couple months ago now, sent me a screenshot of a Craigslist ad where he had a San Franciscan 6-pound roaster. And he said, looks like we might be trading mountain bike lessons for coffee roasting lessons soon. And I said, that's awesome. Like, that's a really serious roaster to get started with. And I half jokingly said something to the effect of, should we start a bikey dude's coffee roasting business? And the next message was his phone number. And he said, call me when you have a minute. So I did pretty quickly. And he said, so how serious are you? And I said, very interested. What are you thinking? And so we got together the next day and sat down and talked about visions of starting a coffee roasting business, something that we each independently had been thinking about for a while. And our values and missions and goals and desires aligned. And we had a couple more times where we sat down and talked over the phone and stuff, and decided, yeah, let's do it. So a week or two later, purchased the roaster that he had been looking at, and made arrangements for it to be delivered to us, and took delivery. And now we're looking for its home so we can get things set up and get started roasting.
And that's been a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Finding a home for it.
Yeah, so we thought we were going to be able to share some space with some friends who own Primitive Beer. They are brewing awesome, spontaneous fermented beers in Longmont. And they have a great space. They're really great people. And we were hoping to rent some space from them and kind of work together. We got some quotes for installation of the roaster, and it turned out to be really cost prohibitive to install because it's not an easy install at that location. The roaster really could only go in a couple of spots to not disrupt what they're doing. And it would require a total of about 85 feet of ventilation ducting, exhaust ducting. And that's a lot. It's too much. So that means having to put in an extra fan to be able to keep airflow, which is extremely important in coffee roasting. So it was going to be over $12,000 to just get installed and be able to turn the roaster on and roast a batch of coffee, which is about 10 times what an installation should cost. So we decided that we had to start looking at other places, explore other options for where we could have a much easier install and actually get things going without throwing a lot of money away at getting started. So we've toured a couple of places that are promising, and have a couple other opportunities that we're looking into. Actually going to check out a place this evening.
Excellent. I know you've looked at a place in Lyons. Are you still thinking you might have to go that far away from?
So that's where we're looking tonight to see if it will work. And that's just kind of sharing some space with the other business partner, Mike, sharing some space with one of his friends. Would be very temporary, but something to get us up and going so we can get some coffee roasted, get some samples out, and get things moving. Do
you want to tell us the name of your business?
Yeah, it's Traction Coffee Roasters.
Is there a website yet, or?
There's not a website yet. It's being worked on, but it's not ready yet. The other business partner, Mike, has been doing a lot of work on design, getting logos and doing some branding stuff. And he's working on the website as well. So I think that's probably going to be ready in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. And hopefully everything is going to come together kind of pretty much all at once, and we can get things going.
So how is this going to be different than Proper? Are you going to be roasting different kinds of beans, different sources? Like what's different for you?
Yeah. So we will be roasting some different beans for sure. Looking at doing some stuff that you just don't see most places, trying to get some really high end, really high quality stuff so people can experience the difference of some really great just really great coffee. There's a variety of coffee called Gesha that's a lot more rare than the most, the normal stuff you see that are Arabica varietals. There are many, many different types of varieties of coffee, just like there are different types of apples.
Mm-hmm.
So Geshas are really expensive and really sought after by people who have, drink a lot of coffee, have a pretty refined palate for coffee, and want to experience just some crazy flavors, pretty much. And that's the sort of thing that we're interested in, is just kind of blowing people's mind, because coffee, has a huge spectrum. It can just be the black stuff you drink in the morning to wake up. But for me, for Sean, for Mike, our other business partner, like, we're really interested in getting some crazy flavors that just make you be like, oh, so this also is coffee. And we want to share that with people who haven't got to experience it, because a lot of times these types of coffees might be $13 a cup, $20 a cup, which is not what most people are willing to spend. Just don't have any interest in that. But what we want to do is have a good wholesale based business, and then do a lot of online retail of our more high end stuff, and be able to basically just keep the cash flow to where we can sustain a business, but then also do some really crazy stuff and offer it very cheap, so people can jump into that world of having coffee that just kind of blows their mind.
Will there be a storefront, or will it just be a roastery and you buy the beans and you make it happen on your own?
Yeah, the first and main focus is the roasting, but we definitely want to have more of a tasting room than a cafe. We may eventually do more of a cafe where there are many options and maybe some food and stuff. Definitely want to have a community aspect, but the first priority is just getting the roaster installed, getting to roasting some beans, and we will build the rest.
Well, tell us about, you currently do cupping on, is it Mondays or Tuesdays?
It's Monday. Yeah, we do. At Proper, we do cupping every Monday at 1 o'clock right now.
And what's that like? Tell us about cupping.
So cupping is the way that you taste the nuances, the subtle differences in coffees. So um, at any given time, we'll have from 5 to 10 different coffees on the table, and not only will it be from different regions, different origins, but we'll also have maybe 5 batches of the exact same Colombia. And I've done just a couple little tweaks to change some variables, and we're testing and tasting the differences in, what does it taste like if I put all the airflow into the roasting drum at 230 degrees versus 270 degrees, or the total time going from 12 minutes to 13 minutes, or if we eject at a temperature of 415 degrees or 410 degrees. Just all of those little changes. When you have a cupping, it's a way of being able to, like I said, get the subtleties out of everything, and having things side by side to taste is the best way to do that, because you don't even really have to have much of a memory involved. It's just
Yeah.
one's here, one's here. Taste this one, taste this one. Go back and forth, taste them at different temperatures.
Do you have to clean your palate between tastings?
You can. A lot of times we'll have sparkling water out. One of the things I do is kind of arrange them in a certain way so that you have the cleaner flavors to start, and flavors are getting more intense and or heavier on your palate as you move along. So you don't, you wouldn't want to go drink a straight espresso and then taste an extremely delicate white tea after, because your palate's going to be kind of clouded. And kind of that same theory goes into arranging the cupping. But yeah, drinking some sparkling water and just kind of swishing between coffees is a good way to do that as well.
Austin, do you have any questions?
No, except I'm just really excited to catch up with you as we go along and see how this is all progressing. It sounds like a really great concept.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it here in this area.
Yeah, and we're focusing on Longmont, which is where I just moved to about a month ago. My girlfriend and I bought a place up here, and we've been looking at that area for a couple of years, thinking it would be cool to live up here, and it seems like a really good community. And in my opinion, there's not any really excellent coffee, and we just kind of want to jump into the coffee scene here and be able to grow the offerings that are around here and get more people excited about coffee.
Now, is Longmont, is that part of Denver? Or is that a small, I don't know what Longmont is.
Yeah, it's a smaller town. It's north of Denver, probably about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Depending on what part of Denver you're talking about.
So it's an area that doesn't already have sort of a hopping like roastery in town, or?
Yeah, there are a few people roasting here. A couple of them are my friends, and they live very close. They focus on selling their coffee at the Boulder Farmers Market, and they have their coffee in a few stores, which is awesome. But they don't have a storefront. And then there's a local small chain called Ozo Coffee. They are based in Boulder, but they maybe a year or so ago, they opened another location up here in Longmont. And then there are a few other, chain coffee shops around.
So you'll already have kind of a good community up there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You have a community that's aching for what you're about to provide.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the truth. I feel like Colorado doesn't have enough good coffee for the population that's here, the number of people that are here. I don't understand why there aren't.
Yeah, it's pretty concentrated in Denver. And there are a handful of places. Loveland has a really impressive coffee shop called Dark Heart Coffee Bar. They've done an amazing job. They're a multi-roaster, which means that they bring in coffee from many places and serve multiple people's coffee on different brew methods.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
I
that's
live
great.
in Broomfield. I've been living in Broomfield for, it's almost 9 years now. We have no coffee, and it is something I have been begging every person I know who owns a coffee shop, please open up a branch in Broomfield. So I drive to have coffee, really good coffee, because we have Starbucks, and the employees at the Starbucks here are delightful people. Let me just give those ladies and men a shout out, because I love them dearly when I'm in a hot mess hurry and have to get some Starbucks. I'm glad they're here. But I really want that yummy coffee that is roasted with love, like right there in-house or somewhere nearby, and served up by people who have made like barista-ing their job. They're not just, I don't know, piling sugar into the cup to make it a dessert. Anyway, there's nothing like that in Broomfield is my point. And some places have come and gone trying to do it, just haven't been successful. So I'm thrilled that you're bringing that to this area, and Longmont surely needs you.
I think so.
So we always ask our guests like what questions they would like to answer, because we have millions of questions just in 5 minutes of listening to them talk. One question that Jake wanted me to ask him was, what are his favorite 3 coffee shops? And he also suggested we ask this of future guests. So we're going to add that to our platform. So Jake, tell us a little bit about your favorite coffee shops.
So 3 of them. first one that comes to mind is Second Best in Kansas City, which is where I am from until about 3 years ago. Second Best is a really cool shop. They started out as a multi-roaster, and then they eventually started to roast their own as well. They were one of the first places that I went to that had a Slayer espresso machine, which is one of the machines that does pre-infusion, and you can really control what you're getting out of it, which really impressed me and used to be the way that I would find new coffee shops to try. They do really amazing stuff. Their roasting, their presentation, all of their drinks are pretty awesome. Here in Colorado, Queen City is one of my new favorites, down in the Baker neighborhood of Denver. Really cool guys, doing a lot of direct sourcing, which is really great, trying to help farmers out and help provide a good living for them. They roast some really great stuff and have a really cool shop that they share space with a brewery. What was my third? So Bad Coffee is a cool little shop in Costa Mesa, California. Clever name. Many people chuckle at, but it's a cool little space. They're also a multi-roaster, and do some really good stuff.
Cool. All right, Austin, you got any more questions?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, I think we're going to wrap this up. As we end this episode, I want to thank our guest, Jake Schell, again for being with us today. And thank you for all you listeners that are listening out there. We want to hear from you too. Perhaps you guys know a barista that needs to be featured on our show, or maybe you got a question about the coffee industry and you want us to interview an expert on that topic. Whatever your thoughts are, please send us your big ideas. Our email address is info@baristaunfiltered.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, but I will confess to you that I do not know how to use Twitter and Instagram. I'm pretending, so be patient with me if you're looking for me there. Best thing to do is email me for now. We will get a website up and rolling too, but this is a work in progress. If you want to support our podcast, we do have an account on Patreon, so visit us there. That is Patreon, patreon.com/barista unfiltered. You can donate to our podcast in any amount or on any schedule that works for your budget. We've got a sign off now. I'm really excited about that. So the way we're going to do this, and this is a surprise to Jake, and eventually it'll be part of our program. We're going to say, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to say, stay caffeinated, friends. And that's going to be our sign off. So before we do that, I want to remind you all that I'm Jodie Lee. And
I'm Austin Miller.
We are so happy to be providing this podcast to you. On the count of 3, stay caffeinated, friends. 1, 2, 3.
Stay caffeinated, friends.
Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you.